Hey, Texas Values friends. Jonathan Saenz here, president of Texas Values. You know, we reach this day every year in the month of January where we take a moment to pause and reflect on now 47 years since the Roe versus Wade U.S. Supreme Court decision. You can see where I stand on this issue, right? I stand for life. This is a sign that we've used at a lot of different events that we've been a part of at the Texas Capitol and other parts of the state. And you may be a part of those events this week. I'll talk a little bit about some things that are happening this week as we see a lot of activity and a lot of messaging, a lot of communication, just a lot of information when it comes to the life issue. But look, we have to talk about the role of Texas when it relates to this U.S. Supreme Court decision. And the Roe versus Wade decision was a U.S. Supreme Court decision. It is, right? But it originated from a federal court decision in the state of Texas. Henry Wade was the district attorney in the Dallas County area. That's where the court case originated. Roe versus Wade, we know the Roe was Norma McCorvey. I'll talk about her in just a minute and some of the history. But we know that it's been one of the most important, if you will, significant Supreme Court decisions because the impact that it's had on the amount of babies in the wombs that have lost their life since this Supreme Court decision, essentially legalizing abortion through all 9 months of a woman's pregnancy. And so, you know, I mean, this is what I was taught in law school, right? The phrase, the law is a teacher. And when you have now the Supreme Court essentially creating law that says that you can take the life of an innocent child in the womb, you're communicating to folks after that generation in that time period that there's nothing wrong with doing that, that it's almost a moral judgment, if you will, that it's become okay. And look, I was born 9 months after the Roe versus Wade decision in September of 1973. And many people like myself, you know, we were born after the Roe versus Wade decision. You know, we have kind of our perspective on those type of things and the decision. But a lot of people don't realize that the decision started in Texas, and it started with a simple federal court case that worked its way all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. But I'll be holding a sign like this later this week. Maybe you will be in Washington, D.C. We want you to know we stand with you as well, and not just for the issue of life, but with you and all the almost 10 members of our team as well. I want to take a little bit of history, though, just to show you a couple of books that have still got some tabs here from this book. But let's start with One by Love. You know, if you're just starting to get educated about the life issue and you're starting to want to talk about it, I remember from a conversation I had where a young lady came up to me one time and said, as a man, I shouldn't be able to talk about the issue of life because it doesn't impact me, it has nothing to do with me. And I asked her if that meant any man should not have ability to talk about this issue. And she said, yes, that's right. And should not have an opinion on the issue, not impact the issue. And she agreed. And I said, well, are you aware that all 9 justices of the U.S. Supreme Court were men? So why is it that they were allowed to have a say in this, but I'm not, right? And it takes me back to this book written by Norma McCorvey, who's since passed away, but was the original Roe in Roe versus Wade. If you haven't read this book and you're trying to get more information, you're new to the movement, or you know you're a young person, whatever the case may be, you just want to learn a little bit more. You know, people just don't read books like they used to, it seems, but that value and function has not lost its significance. But this was a great book, One by Love. You know, Norma McCorvey, the Roe versus Wade, she became a Christian. A lot of people don't realize that. And that she never had an abortion. And so, but she certainly was caught up in this case, and you can hear a lot about what happened to her and really, you know, the burden that was on her heart for so many years because of the outcome of the case, even though she became a pro-life advocate. Just a compelling information. You got it, One by Love. The other one, The Hand of God. And I've got several books, more of them at home, as a matter of fact, on the life issue. Bernard Nathanson was one of the premier late-term partial birth abortion doctors, and he became a pro-life advocate and supporter. But you got to hear it from his account, what it was like in those procedures, what it was like to be getting caught up in the movement. Read about how he talks about how the revolutionary technology at that time of the sonogram, how that impacted the life movement. And so to get an understanding of some of the laws that we work on and how they impact society and people's messaging. And so, but then to hear an account of what was one of the pivotal moments for him. And I won't ruin it for you, but it's great. He talks about one of the key moments when it just became so clear to him that he could no longer perform abortions. Bernard Nathanson, The Hand of God, is the name of this book. Just tremendous reading. And so, it's good to know your history, right? To know. I was in the courtroom a couple of years ago in Dallas where the original Roe versus Wade Supreme Court decision took place. I was also at the U.S. Supreme Court with Gianna Jessen, a late-term abortion survivor, if you want to call it that. I like to use the word conqueror because she's thrived since then, since surviving a late-term abortion. But I've been at the U.S. Supreme Court advocating through a brief on her account and being there with one of our other clients, a little boy, Zachary Kloppenstein, who survived a late-term abortion, sitting there on the front row of the Supreme Court with his mother from the Supreme Court case. And so, I've been in a lot of different of those venues, and so have members of our team. But it's good to know the history of why the issue came about, what led to the U.S. Supreme Court decision on Roe versus Wade, the precedents that came before that, and why it's important to continue to stay engaged in this battle, even though I've lost count in the United States, whether we're at 50 or 60 million babies that are born. The number of abortions in Texas have actually gone down, even though it's still a striking number, somewhere around 50,000 abortions every year in the state of Texas, but it's almost been cut in half because state legislators and you communicating with your legislator and supporting and electing the right people have had an impact on that as well. I mean, the sonogram bill, just that technology itself, women being able to see the baby in their womb has had a tremendous impact. But it's important to really know about where these things have come about. So I encourage you to do that and get involved in the public witness and get involved in one of these marches. There's a huge march in D.C. this week, I believe on Friday. I know we've got one of our former interns is going to be there. We're going to be involved in the one here in Austin, the Texas March and Rally for Life here at the Texas Capitol. We'd love for you to come and be a part of that event as well. We've been involved in that for some time, and we've been to other events across the state of Texas. And I've been to the one in D.C. before myself. I'll be here with my family on Saturday if you'd like to join us and be a part of the Rally for Life. I think it's between 1 and 3 on Saturday. But this is not a day that we, really get excited about looking back on, even though it's important, because it's a reminder of the lives that are being lost every day, every moment, and the work that we still have to do with the Supreme Court decision still being in existence. But I want to just take you a little bit back personally. When I was a student at the University of Houston, I was leading a pro-life group, and really I was there as a law student. This group already existed, but the government was not treating them fairly, letting them have events on campus and things of that nature. And so being pro-life myself, I was wanting to be an advocate, a lot of what I do now, a lawyer on these issues. I found myself being a client though. I was the head of the pro-life group at one point. We dwindled down to one member. That was me. And they were threatening to kick kids out of school. Really, I was about to lose everything I had worked for, even as a law student. But we sued the university, and we won. And what was really compelling to me, too, was not only being victorious, and it was hard. I mean, it's a little bit easier for me to talk about it now and get excited about it, right, and celebrate that type of court victory during that time in my life, if you will. But when it was happening, it was difficult. Okay, feeling like I was the only one, and I was at the time. Fellow Christians that weren't even supporting things had gotten really, tough for people, and you can understand that. When the government comes down on you, people get scared, okay? And so, but I stood firm, and at some point thought I might lose my future, but I knew that what we were doing was right, and I was thankful that Christian lawyers from Alliance Defending Freedom represented us, and we ended up winning. But it was tough, okay? Really getting a lot of that pressure, dealing with it almost a daily basis from university administrators and so on. But we stood firm. But the real victory came when we had an event later, because we were able to have our event on campus, and a young lady was being forced, a student was being forced to have an abortion by her boyfriend, which is what she told us. And so she talked with us, talked to some members of our team, and got information about really the development of the child in her womb. And by the time she left our event and stopped talking to one of our members, she had decided to keep the baby in her womb. And that's one life of the many that we hope our efforts and many others that you're a part of are helping save. Do not be discouraged. There is a lot of work still to do, but there's a lot of reasons to be encouraged. There's a lot of good things that are happening that shows we're headed in the right direction. more young people are involved in this movement. And just one example really is a Senate bill that was passed last session, Senate Bill 22. And the author of that bill was Donna Campbell, a female emergency room physician. Also Candy Noble, state representative from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, freshman legislator who's long been involved in the pro-life movement before she became an elected official. That bill is making it clear that governments cannot have contracts with abortion providers. You know, as we continue to cut off the funding for abortion providers at the state level, they're looking for streams of revenue for wherever they can get them. You know, kind of backhanded contracts, cutting deals, giving discounts like they were here in Austin to Planned Parenthood. But then another thing that happened along with that piece of legislation, that cut off the ability of school districts to have sex education provided by abortion providers, like they were trying to do in Austin ISD with Planned Parenthood. That has been almost, I don't want to say a new frontier, but an evolving and a growing frontier for the abortion providers. You know, if they can't get money to provide abortions, they've been now trying to get money from the government to provide sex education. Can you imagine what it would be like, what it's like if you have some of the main people that are teaching your kids about sex are the ones that are performing, the same entity that is performing the most abortions and is the largest abortion provider not only in the country but in the world. And it not only relates to the life issue, but also going against biblical worldviews and things of that nature. But that bill has cut off the ability of Planned Parenthood to be involved in sex education in public schools. That's a huge victory of life. That means less children, less women, less young people that are going to be influenced and really encouraged to take the life in their womb. Their unborn child, the life of their unborn child, or be really maneuvered around parental rights laws that we have. We hear reports of that in the state of Texas. And so there's a lot of reasons to be encouraged. House Bill 16, the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, and many other laws that you can read about that we've been a part of and others have as well through the leadership in our state and our organization. If you go to our website, txvalues.org. But I just want to take a few minutes to recognize, to acknowledge the significance of this day. But it doesn't have to just be focused on the decision itself. It can also be a moment for us to recognize things are headed in a very good direction and that we may be closer than we've ever been to overturning Roe versus Wade. So you can read more about our work and learn about the work we do at txvalues.org, but continue to be bold, to be strong, be courageous, and stand for life.